Hey, it's Tigman. Time for this week's edition of the Metal Box, our weekly discussion on all things hard rock and heavy metal. We recently had a chance to speak to guitarist Joe Satriani, covered a bunch of topics. He's got a brand new album coming out called What Happens Next. That's going to be out next Friday, January 12th. And also next week, the G3 Tour 2018 kicks off. That features Joe Satriani with John Petrucci of Dream Theater and Phil Collen of Def Leppard. It's going to play the Palace in Albany on February 10th, so we talked about that. And we talked about a variety of topics. Check out the full interview right here. We got the great Joe Satriani on the phone with us. Hey, Joe, it's Tigman. How are you?
I'm doing great today. How about you?
Doing great, despite this snow that we've got coming down here, and the roads are terrible, but good to be chatting with you today. You got a lot going on. Of course, the new album coming out, What Happens Next, which will be out January 12th. And let's talk first, though, G3 Tour 2018. It's you with John Petrucci from Dream Theater and Phil Collen of Def Leppard. You've worked with John before on these tours, right?
That's right, yeah. Going back 2001, John's been on quite a few of G3s, maybe almost as many as Steve Vai. So, yeah, we've played a lot together.
Now, how'd you hook up with Phil Collen to round out the bill here?
You know, I met Phil for the very first time when he joined my G4 Experience camp last August in Carmel, California. It totally blew me away. I didn't realize, that he could be a shredder, that he was a, fantastic performer, singer, guitar player outside of Def Leppard. I kept thinking, he's going to show up and he's going to be able to teach all these campers from a very unique perspective, because he's been in this superstar band.
Yeah.
And he is a superstar, But just one-on-one, I was totally surprised, happily surprised at what a great musician he was, totally top to bottom, and fearless, confident, fearless, and a great player. So it was no surprise when I was thinking, wow, I got to get him on a G3, and I was totally blown away when he said yes. So I'm very excited.
Well, the tour kicks off next week, right? January 11th. Is the tour kickoff?
Yes, I know. It's coming right up. I got to get my stuff together. Got to start packing.
It's coming soon. Everybody's excited. G3 Tour 2018 will play the Palace here in Albany on February 10th. You can get tickets through the Palace box office and through Ticketmaster.com. You've been doing this for how long? When did the G3 Tour start?
It started in '96. Wow. I remember it pretty clearly. It was October 3rd or 4th or something like that. In '96, and we played at the Concord Pavilion here in Northern California.
Believe it or not, I've never been to a G3 tour. I've seen you perform. One concert that stands out is back in, maybe 15 years ago when you were on tour with Deep Purple and Thin Lizzy.
Oh, wow.
I know, it's been that long, but you played SPAC here in Saratoga Springs. That was a great tour, and that was awesome to see. And I know you spent some time in Deep Purple, too, for a little bit.
Yes. I had the pleasure and the horror of having to replace Richie Blackmore, which you can't, It's
big shoes, right, Joe? Big shoes.
Yes. I was a big fan of Richie Blackmore, loved Deep Purple, and I actually, when they called, they were in a spot. They had 1 week, they couldn't cancel, they had to have somebody fill in for Richie, and I remember saying no, and then a half hour later I called back and said, okay, I got to do it, because when will I ever get a chance to play with Deep Purple, right? It was difficult. The first couple of shows in Japan, I really felt like a kid, like I didn't know what I was doing in a way. But the band, they were so nice. They were such a fantastic group of musicians. Even the audience made me feel welcome in a way. I think they felt sorry for me. So I got it in my mind, I'm just going to celebrate Richie with the audience. I'm not going to try to replace him. So I lasted 6 months, and ultimately I realized I wasn't the guy to replace him. I wanted to go back to my own career.
Sure.
They needed someone who wanted to stay with the band forever and sort of reinvent the band, and Steve Morse was the perfect guy for that.
Had to be some experience, though, playing with those guys.
It was really great. I mean, just, wow. They sounded like you somehow got transported into the record machine head. That's exactly what they sounded like in a rehearsal room. You know what I mean?
It's awesome.
No studio trickery needed. That's what they sounded like. It was really remarkable.
Well, if somebody has not seen the G3 tour, tell us what we can expect for this upcoming tour here.
On the G3 tours, in this particular one, Phil Collen and John Petrucci will play their own sets with their own bands, as well as myself, along with my band. And then when I'm finished with my segment, I invite Phil and John on stage to join me in my band, and we celebrate the electric guitar by playing a bunch of well-known songs that we surprise the audience with, and we sort of toss it back and forth. We basically have the best time guitar players could ever have on stage, and we do that night after night in as many places as they'll let us do it.
It's going to be great. February 10th, Palace in Albany. Tickets on sale now. We're speaking with Joe Satriani. Let's talk about the new album, What Happens Next. Comes out January 12th. That's next Friday. You got your bandmate in Chickenfoot there, Chad Smith, also from the Chili Peppers. And you also have the voice of rock, Glenn Hughes, who's not only got an awesome voice, one of the greatest rock vocalists ever, because that's why they call him the voice of rock, but a great bassist. How did you hook up with Glenn? Is this your first time working with him?
It is, really. We met each other like outside a hotel in New Zealand many years ago when we were both playing at a guitar festival down there. And then a year or two after that, we shared the stage for one Deep Purple song, as a matter of fact, at the Marshall 50th anniversary in London. And but it's like I didn't really know him, but I just was always thinking to myself, his bass playing to me is rock bass playing. And you talk about the voice of rock, but for me, I was also saying, yeah, but he's also the bass player of rock, isn't he? Cause
sure.
That's what always hit me, is that Glenn Hughes, the singer, and the bass player, to me, is one huge tour de force,
Now, the album, though, is all instrumental, obviously, right, Joe? There's no vocal tracks. Was it hard to not include the voice of rock to sing on one of these tracks? That's what I was thinking.
Because, he's always singing, right, when you're hanging out with him.
Yeah.
He starts singing, and you go like, oh, my God, that's unbelievable. I got to record it, It was very difficult to do, to stay focused on the instrumentals. And what we've discovered, like halfway through the record, at one point he said to me, he goes, I have never recorded an instrumental record before. This is the first time anyone had ever hired him to only play bass. And I was stunned because I thought everyone would be calling him to play bass. So I was like, well, this is great. Finally, I get to channel, the great Glenn Hughes into something different, something that he can see as a new experience. And he was fantastic. I mean, the experience recording with Glenn and Chad is just like one of the greatest times I've ever had in the studio. And they're just amazing people and fantastic musicians.
Great music on the new album. I've heard the tracks. We're playing Energy, which is great, and Thunder High on the Mountain is also another awesome track. January 12th, What Happens Next comes out. And before I let you go, because I know we're running out of time, I do have to ask you, what kind of students were Kirk Hammett and Steve Vai?
Those two guys were great. I mean, very different how I met them. Steve Vai was 12 years old and could not play guitar at all when I met him. He showed up on my front door with a guitar with no strings in one hand and a pack of strings in the other, and said, hey, you're teaching my friend. Can you teach me how to play too? So that was my introduction to Steve. Kirk was already a really good guitar player. He was already the lead guitarist in Exodus when I met him, and I'd already moved to Berkeley, California by then. So he walked into a store where I was teaching, looking for lessons, because he knew that I was teaching a bunch of other thrash metal kids in the neighborhood there. And so working with Kirk was a lot easier because he was already pretty accomplished player. He was already an advanced player, and he was still in Exodus at the time, but then very quickly he got the gig with Metallica, so the lessons became extremely important because he was working and making albums. And exciting times, very exciting times. They were both fantastically dedicated musicians, as they are today.
And will we see new Chickenfoot music with you and Sammy Hagar and the boys?
So I know Sammy has expressed real desire to record a new record sometime this year, and I know that Chili Peppers might be taking a break, so things are looking good. The only thing we have to do is we have to get Mike Anthony off of his permanent vacation.
Exactly.
To work a little bit.
Well, hope it happens. Looking forward to that, and looking forward to G3, the Palace in Albany, February 10th. Joe, you with John Petrucci and Phil Collins, going to be a great show, and thanks for spending time with us today. It was a pleasure to chat with you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Nice to talk to you.
And that'll do it for this week's edition of the Metal Box. Thanks for tuning in. The Rock and Roll Limo has arrived. We'll see you next week.